Even a drug that you're supposed to take for the rest of your life will probably be studied for 6 months to 9 months, maybe a year. And it will only be 1,500 to 3,000 people. I don't believe I ever saw a drug trial that had more than 3,000 people in it.
Our next guest, Suzanne Robotti, her journey involves a drug, DES, which was given to her mom and resulted in Suzanne's infertility. As it sounds, Suzanne is uniquely positioned to be a rigorous advisor to the FDA about which medications should be considered safe. Not only is Suzanne an FDA advisor, she has also started the independent journalism company, MedShadow Foundation.
So assume every drug that's being advertised on TV is a brand new drug. 3,000, 3,500 people have ever taken this, ever. And now, since there are 350 million people in the United States, millions of people will be taking this drug. You are part of what's sometimes called a phase 4 trial.
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity Podcast. Have you ever wanted to have a conversation with somebody behind the scenes at the FDA? Well, maybe you guys aren't as geeky as I am, but I know I have. Well, our next guest, Suzanne Robotti, is that person. Her journey involves a drug, DES, which was given to her mom and resulted in Suzanne's infertility. As it sounds, Suzanne is uniquely positioned to be a rigorous advisor to the FDA about which medications should be considered safe. Not only is Suzanne an FDA advisor, she has also started the independent journalism company, MedShadow Foundation, which is a non-profit organization whose mission is to save lives and ensure quality of life for anybody taking medications. If you want to make better decisions for yourself and your family about medications, you want to stay for this entire episode. Suzanne, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm so glad to be here, Chris. I think you're doing a great job with your podcast, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Excellent. Thank you. So before we jump into your area of expertise, I want to go further back. I want to go much further back. What was it like growing up as little Suzanne, or maybe Sue? Where did you grow up? What were your parents like? If there was some event or someone you could pinpoint as the reason you would ultimately become a drug safety advocate and expert, even getting involved with parking concerns in New York City, what or who would that person be?
Well, I'll go back a little bit. There are two seminal events, so to speak. So growing up, I was Susu was my little girl nickname, and I was number 3 out of 4 daughters. And I like to say I never tried at all because I was number 3. But it was it was a very storybook, traditional, suburban. I grew up in New Jersey, growing up. Typical public school, all fine. But then I didn't get my period. And so my mother took me to the doctor when I got to be about 13 and a half, 14, and she thought the rest of my body looked ready for a period. My puberty seemed to be moving ahead. And one thing led to another, and ultimately it turned out that because my mother had been given prescribed a drug called diethylstilbestrol. You can call it DES. Nobody calls it diethylstilbestrol. DES. When she was pregnant, as were 5 to 10 million other pregnant women during a 30, 40-year time span between the 1940s and early 70s. It affected my ability to then have children of my own. So ironically, she was given a drug in pregnancy that the doctors told her would keep her from miscarrying. And yet, ultimately, it turned out that science was very bad. And so the drug did no good whatsoever and harmed many of the offspring. It was a synthetic estrogen. It was the very first synthetic estrogen. It was the era of wonder drugs. People believed that drugs could really change lives for the better. And indeed, they can and do. But it was also the era with thalidomide. People remember thalidomide because it had such a visual impact. It was the drug given to women at the same time period. But the children born with that, if they're exposed at the right time in the right quantities or at the wrong time in the wrong quantities, ended up with shortened arms and legs. That was not us. The DES daughters and sons, that would be those of us exposed in the womb as fetuses, our damages were hidden and generally didn't become apparent until we were teenagers or trying to get pregnant. So because it was estrogen, it tended to affect the fertility organs. And as you mentioned, with me, it just resulted in me never being able to bear children. That doesn't mean I couldn't have had children. I could have adopted. There are many ways that children come into your life. But that option was, at that time period, out for me. Fortunately, I know that sounds weird. I found out early in my life when I was 13, 14 years old. So I didn't have to go through years of infertility and trying and that disappointment. I grew up knowing that. My husband married me knowing that. We went into that together as a team already. So that was when I realized that medicines can harm, can do a lot of damage. Now, thalidomide was never approved by the FDA to be used as a drug in the U.S. The very first woman investigator ever hired by the FDA is the one who stopped thalidomide, and the pressure was intense on her because worldwide it was accepted and everybody used it. But with DES, it went right through the FDA and was approved for use in pregnancy. So it's hard to blame the doctors for prescribing it when the FDA said it was okay. Although there was a lot of research published in that time period where doctors, if they were paying attention, would have seen that it didn't make any sense. A very dramatic thing, the reason they actually found out the problems with DES is because it can cause a very rare cancer, clear cell adenocarcinoma, CCA. I fortunately did not have that cancer. So life goes on. You get up, you grow up, you get married, which I was happy to do. And
I want to ask a couple of questions here.
Sure.
And maybe you said this, so we got, if I'm saying it right, thalidomide.
Thalidomide.
It never got FDA approval, and in fact, it was the first female kind of advisor investigator. Mm-hmm. that denied it. So kudos to her, right? Because that's a tough position early on. Was she also responsible for clearing DES? Okay,
she was not. It's just that they happened at the same time.
Right.
There's parallel tracks, and it shows how important it is for the investigators to really question drugs that are proposed to the DES. So many do get turned down, but maybe not all that should. The FDA has a very difficult decision because every drug has side effects. There is no drug without a side effect. Anything you ingest, even food, has a side effect, as we all know. It can give you an upset stomach. It can make you fat. It can help you. And the nutrients are important. So anything you ingest, but particularly medicines, all have a potential downside. And there's not a guaranteed upside. Medicines work differently in every person, and not every person. You have a headache and you take a Tylenol or an Advil, your headache may or may not go away. So the FDA's most important decision is it effective and is it safe? And since no drug is actually safe, does the effectiveness outweigh the risk of harm? And in this case, with DES, it did not. It clearly did not. And ultimately in the early 70s, the FDA withdrew its approval for DES to be used in pregnancy. But it was also the very first endocrine disruptor ever introduced into the ecosphere unnaturally. And so the grandchildren and potentially the great-grandchildren will also be affected. The NIH was studying it for generations. They were working on third-generation studies, and the funding has been pulled. So we will never know how the very first endocrine disruptor travels through generations, which is, to me, a second harm there. A terrible decision.
Yeah, it sounds so you think about thalidomide, which I'm butchering. I'm comfortable with.
It's nice to know people are beginning to forget thalidomide because it was so horrible. It's not nice to forget, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, well, no, I appreciate what you're saying. So was it potentially the case that the FDA, which didn't apply to thalidomide,
Thalidomide.
we'll just, I'm going to point and then you say it, we'll be good. I'm not sure I'm going to get it right. So it never got approved here, but was used worldwide. Like tens of thousands of people, I think, took that.
Yes.
And ultimately, in fact, the reason I'm familiar with it is because I had a conversation. One of my kind of roles here is to figure out what happens in a rat, like what percentage of things that happen in a rat actually happen in a human.
Huh.
And I had a Professor Kudabek out of DePaul University one time. He was actually talking to my business partner who was on the other side of the wall. And I heard him talking about he takes rat studies to human studies regularly, right? And there is a number, like what percentage of stuff. So I ran over there and I was like, hey, I've got to ask you this question. And he gave that story as a lot of scientists will say, this is proof that what happens in a rat doesn't necessarily happen in a human. But the problem was, if they had looked at the fetuses of the rats, they would have noticed deformities in the fetuses of the rats. They never got that far. So, and that's a long way to get to was it potential that the scientific community wasn't thinking that far down the road? Like, what is going to be the impact on the offspring of the rats and potentially humans? Or did they just, turn a blind eye to some data that was available?
That's fascinating, the rat studies. There were mouse studies done on DES, and the person who invented DES saw that the mice who were exposed to DES, the female mice, ended up with breast cancer, which many of the mothers, the DES mothers, that would be the women given DES, they had a very high rate of breast cancer. So he said it should never be used in a fertile woman. And he did not want it used for it. It gets into politics and some bad researchers from Harvard. Sorry, Harvard.
They're not all good.
Tenured researchers can make mistakes too. Very, very painful, long-lasting, bad mistakes. And in the mouse studies with DES, it predicted very accurately, which is unusual, very accurately what happens in humans. So virtually everything that happens in mice happens in humans. The deformed fertility organs, even the tendency to be gay. A lot of men are in the DES exposed community tend to be gay. And this is a correlation, not a causation proven. So you can be wrong on stuff like that, but it is odd. That even the
Do you know
mice
what kind of percentage? Like, is it twice as likely as the general population, or something to that effect?
I would have to go back to the website. Our website, desaction.org, has the most up-to-date information on this. But it's very hard because people don't tell you that they're gay. They don't. Even now, people consider that private information. Some people don't want it to be identified. So. I say it's a high correlation. There's a guy named Scott Kerwin who does a lot of research on that, but it's not double-blind, placebo-controlled research. So, and it's also a lot of doctors, including my mother's, destroyed their records when they found out about DES and lied about giving it to my mother. They were afraid of being sued. The lawsuit, they can't sue a doctor for giving a drug that's been approved by the FDA.
Yeah,
but
no,
even
that
the
doesn't
pharmacist.
make sense.
Yeah, there were a lot of fires in pharmacies and doctors' offices. They felt bad. That's not the right way to feel bad.
Yeah, no, better to track the data and have more absolute data. That makes a lot more sense to me. And my understanding is that DES is kind of making a comeback, obviously not in the context of preventing miscarriages, but like as some sort of anti-cancer drug. Is that correct?
I don't know anything about that.
Oh, then maybe I'm mixing it. Maybe it was the other one that is.
Thalidomide?
Yes.
It might be thalidomide. The only way that DES is used today that I know of, and people, doctors, scientists appropriately test all drugs ongoing. They get an idea, they know the method of action of a drug, and they think, maybe it could work here, maybe it could work there. And that makes sense. They should do that. And I hope people are trying to find a good use for DES. It's a very powerful drug. The only thing that I know that's used for now is for incontinence in dogs. That's it.
Interesting.
I don't really know why.
What a storied journey to end up in incontinence for dogs.
For dogs, yes.
So I want to roll a little bit farther back. Let's talk a little bit more about your history, right? So your undergraduate degree was in communications. As I was looking through kind of your profile, you've served on all sorts of boards, all sorts of, and I'm assuming this is not DES related because it was later that you kind of became that champion, I think. Talk about, I just want to understand a little bit about you and how you end up in these positions of having influence and where does that come from?
Gosh, I don't know.
I saw you, I think, testifying for New York City parking situation, right? So maybe
I
it is
to be more involved in my community. So I found out that there's a community board in New York City. There are multiple ones for each area, and I joined that, and that was so much fun. I was on the transportation committee and then head of the transportation committee.
So you're on these committees. When did the committees start shifting, or maybe they always were, kind of into the health space?
That is such a perfect question. Thank you. So, because it gets me to the other seminal thing that happened in my life to get me into this field. So, when my husband and I had been married 19 years, and my nephew needed kind of a new place, new home. The family was going through a very difficult time. There's a lot of strife. There were multiple children, 4. And he just ended up being the scapegoat. And if any kid needed to be an only child, it was this kid. So my husband and I said, well, why don't you come live with us for a year? We'll see how it goes. And it was awful. It was a week past his 12th birthday when he came to live with us, and on our 19th wedding anniversary is the day he arrived. And he's a kid going into puberty who has been in a family that hadn't been functioning well for the past several years. So for about 2 years, there's a lot of, and we didn't know what to do. We'd never been parents, no intention of being parents. So for a couple of years, it was just my shoulders are above my ears. But somewhere right around the second year mark, my shoulders relaxed, I relaxed. We kind of got the idea. We, cohesed as a family. He's our kid now. We love him, of course. We always loved him. But he's now 32. It's been 20 years, almost exactly, just over 20 years. And he considers where we are home. Although he lives in Massachusetts and we live in New York. And he's a fully fledged grown adult. He's wonderful. And it was a wonderful experience, a gift from my sister to send her son to live with us. It was a gift to the son. It was a gift to us. It was a wonderful thing. But when he first arrived, he was such a pain in the neck. And the schools immediately called me, put him into a Catholic school because in New York, I still don't know how you get him into school. It's impossible in public school. So we sent him to Catholic school, and within weeks, the principal called and said, you have to put him on Ritalin immediately. He is totally ADHD. And I said, oh, well, I know he's a problem, but, we don't know what we're doing. We're bad parents. He's adjusting. Can we give him a little time? So always think about that. When a doctor suggests you do something, it doesn't feel like what you want to do at that point. Unless your leg is broken, you've got time. You can almost any diagnosis. You still have a week, 2 weeks, a month, maybe 6 months. You can wait and see. So I asked for time, and he said, okay, fine, a little time. Called a couple months later and said, no, we're going to kick him out of the school if you don't do this now. So then I got concerned. This poor kid, already in a different family, couldn't get rejected from the school. So I took him to the leading specialist, ADHD specialist in New York, because apparently that's every doctor in New York is the leading specialist in whatever they do.
In whatever they do, yes.
Everyone starts a sentence with, I have the best ex-doctor. Fine. So we spent about 20 minutes with this doctor. He watched Dan play a video game. The kid, sorry, I should call it the kid. He deserves privacy too. He watched him play a video game, and he then said, okay, he's totally ADHD. Sure. Here's a prescription for 5 milligrams of Ritalin. If that doesn't work, we can double it. If that doesn't work, we can try Wellbutrin or Adderall. Don't worry, we'll get this kid under control. I didn't like anything about that sentence. So I said, so what are the side effects of? Everyone in New York City knows the side effects of ADHD drugs. Jitteriness, lack of appetite, emotional responses, stunted growth potentially. And also the benefits, they do concentrate, they do better in class, they're sometimes easier to get along with, but they can't sleep. There's a balance, and I wasn't comfortable with the balance. And he said, I said, what are the long-term effects of ADHD? It's a drug designed to affect the brain. He's in puberty, which is affecting his brain. What's going to happen? And he said, nothing will happen. And I said, great, can I see the studies? And he said, this is before I had done anything in medicine, nothing. I'd never even thought of a medical journal. And he said, there are no studies, which was true. But he said, I've been giving it to kids for 15, 20 years. I would know, which is not true.
Right.
I knew that. My mother's doctor didn't know. So I said, well, that's not really good enough for me. So I called my friend, the pharmacist.
I got to interject here. This feels very much like DES, right? We're like, hey, this is going to solve this problem long term. We haven't really investigated, although some researcher had, but like you're looking at it from your experience, from a unique perspective that you have, which is, yes. Okay, this is formative years. Like the problem with DES very specifically is the formative years, like excluding the kind of breast cancer piece of it that applies to the mom. And so that's how you're tackling this. And so you decide to roll up your sleeves and go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. I learned everything I needed to about being a patient advocate, a health advocate, by living through this experience and empathizing with him. Now, in my mother's case, it was more difficult because the doctor said you have a likelihood of miscarrying if you don't take this drug. There you're in a life and death situation, what are you going to do? But in this case, it was not life or death. This is behavior modification. I said, what about an ADHD coach? They're useless, the doctor said. So anyway, I took the prescription. I double checked. It was true. At that point, there were no long-term studies. The longest study that had been published at that point was 312 days, and there aren't many more now. But there are some studies coming out about ADHD drugs, but I'll let other people talk about that. And I never gave him the medicine. I filled one prescription. I sent him to school. I lied. I said he was taking it. They said, we know he's not. We can tell.
We were all winking. Like, he's taking it.
But, we kind of, as a Catholic school, we started sending more donations in and doing volunteer work at the school. And so we dragged him through till his high school time. And he was a terrible student. And I'm thinking, he's a terrible student. He's never going to get into college. And I'm thinking, college isn't for every kid. I mean, yeah. So ultimately, he did go to college. And somewhere in the middle of college, he caught fire. He majored in business. He got an MBA. He learned how to manage his ADHD stuff. But so first of all, we took time. We asked questions. We acted stupid. We didn't have to act. And we asked for the alternatives. What are the choices we have? We did find an ADHD coach for our kid. We did find a therapist who could help him work through the trauma of moving to another family. We found a therapist who did not believe in psychotropic drugs, particularly for teenage kids, but worked with, let's get him some more vitamin D. He does not get any more soda. He'd already been all soda. no, pizza once a week. A family has to sit down and have dinner together every night. It has to be home cooked. Don't order out. And these were very basic, life-affirming, family-affirming, things that helped us become more cohesive, helped us all work as a team. That's we use nutrition, we use cognitive behavioral therapy through the therapist, and we found him martial arts. We found him a physical outlet, and he bonded with the martial arts class teacher because it's discipline, and it was something that he really liked. As so many ADHD kids do, they like very clear rules, and kids have been somewhat traumatized from a difficult family situation and moving, like very clear rules. And so that all worked well together. So I don't have any notes in front of me, so I'm kind of just remembering, but ask questions. Oh, and we were lucky. We had enough money and time to do all this. And then we also hired a specialist, a person who could test my kid, to make sure that it was ADHD, and indeed it was not. It was he had several learning disabilities, just a little bit, off center for 3 or 4, processing speeds and this and that, and a little ADHD. And you take 3 or 4 off bases and it presents as ADHD, but that wasn't going to teach him the skills he needed. So we were able to identify what was truly wrong. So, if your gut doesn't feel like it's the right diagnosis, go to another doctor. Ask for a second diagnosis. It works for medicine too. If you're ever given medicine and it doesn't feel like it's working for you, or it's giving you a lousy stomach or a headache, almost every illness we have now has multiple medicines. There's tons of Me Too medicines out there that are all slightly different. What are there, 12 different statins now? Each has a slightly different profile for side effects. If you really need a statin, and I'm jumping now to lessons to learn, or you really need a medicine and you choose to take that medicine and it's not going well, go back to your doctor, go to your pharmacist. Pharmacists are wonderful with drugs. They are drug specialists. They can be your best friend, and they'll say, it doesn't say it on the package, but you should really eat food with this. Or, you're not drinking enough water. Or water is key to everything, of course. So that's kind of my learning process. And as I went through that, as he was getting ready to go off to college, which he finally found a college he, could get into, because he really needed more time to grow up, and we could give him that. I thought if I could do anything, and I could. I didn't have to earn a salary. I live in the, most fun city in the world. What do I want to do? Do I want to play tennis? Do I want to, cure cancer? Do I want to work on world peace? And I thought, no.
Everyone else is doing that.
It's crowded here, very crowded. I thought if I could stop a DES, another DES from ever happening again, I would do that. So I thought, what was the cause of DES? Because I realized that ADHD drugs could be DES happening in front of my eyes. Please God, they're not. But there are drugs out there that are like DES, that are doing more, that have a risk-benefit profile, it's called, that is not a choice that many patients would make if they fully understood the risks and the benefits. And I knew that the risks were not being clear or honest even with patients, because I saw that with the ADHD process. So I thought about trying to pass a laws are clumsy. Anyway, that's when I decided to start MedShadow. So MedShadow.org, it's actually called MedShadow Foundation. We're now an internet platform, which is a very fancy term we have a website, we have social media, we have a YouTube channel, because people like to learn different ways, as we learned with Dan. Some people like videos, some people like articles, some people like e-newsletters. And our articles are all focused on what is it that you really need to know in order to determine the best path to health for you and your family. So we are almost the only place on the internet where you can find information that is not sponsored by pharmaceutical companies. We don't accept money from pharmaceutical companies. We're a nonprofit, and we don't take their money. Although we'll take yours, so feel free to donate if you'd like to. I'm told I have to say that a lot. But
Yeah.
what we do is we try to go beyond what you just read on the little label. Not that anybody reads that label anyway on medicine, but to actually interview people who've had experience, to talk to doctors about what they know about it, pharmacists what they know about it, so that if you are having, I don't know, with indigestion, you could just go on to PPIs, which will mess with they will adjust the acids in your stomach so that they'll do less harm, and you can eat foods that you really shouldn't be eating. We also talk about how you could just not eat those foods that trigger your gastric distress. We also talk about other ways when you are in gastric distress that aren't PPIs, that perhaps have a lower risk profile. Soothing foods, calming foods, teas. We talk about alternative medicines. There's no judgment. There are times when I've turned to medicines. There are times when I've had to take steroids because I wasn't doing the right thing to my back, and to get to the point where I could do the exercises I needed to strengthen my back, I started with the steroids and then moved to PT, and it all worked out fine. If you get hit by a car, nobody's going to argue with Western medicine. You want Western medicine and a lot of it. But if you have something that's interrupting your life, it's probably not life-threatening, but it's just interrupting what you want to do. You have choices. You have options. And so that's what we try to talk about.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
So where's the name MedShadow? Where'd you come up with that?
Well, I came up with it because medicines, med, will follow you forever, shadow. But my executive director has a better explanation. She says the real effects of medicines are often kept in the shadows.
I like both. Like, isn't it great? Isn't it great? That's the path of a writer, where you come up with something and then it gets interpreted maybe a better way.
Yes.
So my understanding, and I think you're in a unique position to really kind of confirm this, is that the efficacy of a lot of drugs that are prescribed is a lot lower than what people realize, right? You're, often talking like a 3 to 5% improvement. And, as people are taking stuff, they're like, I feel like whatever I have for which I'm taking this medication, it's managing the whole thing. But in reality, it's often very small percentage. And what you're doing is saying, hey, if you knew how low this efficacy actually was, and you combined that with an understanding of what the potential negative side effects are, is standard of care determined by the FDA, or is it a medical association? Who decides the standard of care?
Well, there are a lot of people who decide the standard of care, but it comes down to your personal doctor. And your doctor will probably follow guidelines offered by the USPSTF. I said that. United States Preventative Services Task Force. So okay. They're the ones who come up with all the guidelines on when women should get mammograms or cervical cancer tests, or screenings. They're very big on giving guidelines for screenings and preventative care. All of the medical associations have their own guidelines also. And then the FDA, the HHS, and everything underneath it, which is the CDC, the FDA, and a few other organizations, will have information that leads to guidelines, and will sponsor studies and all of that guideline. But in terms of you, anybody listening to this podcast, the person that matters is your doctor, because that's the last line. The pharmacist is your last line of defense, honestly. And I hope that I will never buy drugs through the internet or in the mail. I don't think I ever would. When you go to your pharmacist's counter, there's a person there and you can say, hi, I'm taking this drug, and these vitamins, and I have a cold. Should I be taking Benadryl, or should I be taking Theraflu, or should I be taking Advil PM? What should I be taking? And it's important that you ask that question of somebody, because if you're taking a medicine, any medicine, cold and flu medicines they affect your whole body. And there are many times you should be limiting what your exposure to.
So it's interesting you said that USPSTF is focused on preventative care. I have to suppose that they don't talk much about nutrition and what we actually like that's where real preventative care comes in.
You're correct.
Right, they're coming up with the standard of care. And doctors just they don't have the time to like dig into the research, and so you really this concept of being the CEO of your own health. I'm actually kind of taking notes. That's one of my things that I like to share with the audience. And I love kind of two things that you've said. You have time, right? So like you're the CEO, take the time. Unless the leg's broken, take the time. And then act stupid. I love that. I think a good CEO needs to act stupid so they can collect information. So you start MedShadow. How does that go? Because my understanding is I kind of looked it up. I think you're as a nonprofit you have donations in the range of upwards higher than $1 million. So well done, like running a nonprofit like that. How's that start, and how do you start generating kind of donations, and what does that look like? And then ultimately fold that into the FDA, I'm assuming, invited you. I don't know if there's an application process, but what does that look like?
Yeah. So MedShadow started about 12 years ago, and it's actually more difficult now than it was 12 years ago when we first started. Our site visitors just went crazy, and then in 2019, Google decided that medical sites should only be WebMD and Mayo Clinic. Both these sites, good sites. They don't do what we do. They do different things. And so our site users per day went from like 30,000 to 3,000, literally overnight, off a cliff, because there's a lot of suppression. It's still going on like that, which is why we're now on social media and YouTube, because people can find us that way and do sign up for our newsletter. It's free. So everything we do is free. So, but the FDA is very important. I had taken a class. The NIH actually gave money to an organization so that people like me, patient advocates, health advocates, could be taught about what the FDA is and does, which I had no idea how a drug got approved, what it meant when a drug was approved. And this I'll tell you very quickly about. So in the course of all this, I learned that the FDA, when they have a new drug, will sometimes call in advisory committees. And there are standing advisory committees ready to come in and read the research and give their opinion. And every advisory committee has to have one consumer representative who has a vote. And you can apply. Anyone can apply to be on the committee, but I applied to be a consumer rep, and I was thrilled that I got accepted, and I ran 2 terms, which is kind of the limit, and hopefully in 3 years I get back on again. So because it did force me to learn so much about how a drug is approved. So listen to this. A drug goes through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials before it comes to the FDA. And that's after mouse studies and in vitro lab studies. So it's been studied now in phase 1 trials. That is just to make sure the drug isn't going to kill people immediately. So it's a very small group. It's fewer than 100 people. They give them small doses, and the ratchet it up until people start getting sick on it, and then they back it off, and they consider that's the highest possible dose that people can take comfortably. Then they'll go to phase 2, and they'll find people who have whatever the issue, the physical disease or chronic condition that they want to use it for. And they'll test on maybe 500 to 800 people to see if it actually works and if it's kicking in, what the side effects are a bit. And then phase 3 trial, assuming that it seems that it does work, and it's, again, not killing people and not making them so sick, then it goes to phase 3, which is a bigger trial. And again, that's people who have the actual condition for which the drug is supposed to help. And they take it for, depends on what the drug is supposed to be. But even a drug that you're supposed to take for the rest of your life will probably be studied for 6 months to 9 months, maybe a year. And it will only be 1,500 to 3,000 people. In my 7 years on the FDA committee for drug safety and risk management, that was the particular committee I was on, Drug Safety and Risk Management Advisory Committee, I don't believe I ever saw a drug trial that had more than 3,000 people in it. So realize when a new drug comes out, it's probably going to be advertised on TV. So assume every drug that's being advertised on TV is a brand new drug. 3,000, 3,500 people have ever taken this, ever. And now, since there are 350 million people in the United States, millions of people will be taking this drug. You are part of what's sometimes called a phase 4 trial. What does it do in the real world? This drug has never been, usually, you can say this, it's never been tested on people who are taking other drugs. They look at the method of action and say, well, it's not going to affect statins, for example. Well, so many people take statins, they probably should check that. But out in the real world, what really happens? And there's no control there. There's no requirement that, the first 5 million people who take this drug should be reporting in exactly, did it work? Did it harm them? Did they feel comfortable? Were they happy they took it? Were they sad they took it? Did it interact with other drugs? Nobody's checking that. There is a system that if there is a real harm to the drug, where doctors or patients or family can write in, it's called the FAERS system, FAERS, and I don't even remember what FAERS stands for, but FAERS. And we have it right on our homepage. If you want to report to, the government that this drug, to the FDA, that this drug, it settled your stomach, but your big toe dropped off. You can you can write that in. And they do use that not as actual data because, of course, some people will write that stuff in. But the FDA does monitor it and look for signals. They're seeing a lot of gastric issues, whatever, stuff like that. So let me tell you a Wegovy story. Can I tell you a Wegovy story?
Yeah, sure.
Since it's so popular these days. I was on our committee.
Wegovy's a GLP-1 antagonist, right? Yeah,
antagonist. Yeah. And it's the drug that people take to lose weight. It's the same as Ozempic. Ozempic and Wegovy, literally the same drug from the same company. They just market them for different audiences, interestingly. And so Wegovy was the first of the 2 drugs to come before the FDA looking for an indication, which means an approval. If the FDA approves the drug, they also give the doctors guidelines on it's indicated for use in these cases. So it was asking for an indication of diabetes use, and reading through the information and listening to the doctors, the scientific members of the committee, it seemed very clear that this drug was pretty effective at modulating or calming down your insulin spikes, ups and downs, but it was. And it did. People lost a little bit of weight on it within that trial. People lost 5 to 8% of their body weight. There were other trials later where they managed to get the number higher, but there was a lot of other manipulation that went on with that. But the doctors said, and I said, we all said, something like 30% of the people in the trial, in the clinical trial, dropped out because they couldn't manage the side effects. They couldn't handle it. And which is what we see in the real world. 30 to 40% of people drop out in 2 or 3 months. They can't take it, even though they want that weight loss that badly. And it's bad. You puke, you have diarrhea, it messes up your entire gastric system, or it messes with. It doesn't mess it up, it messes with. So it's ironic and humorous to remember the comments that were made. Doctors were saying, if anyone wants to take this drug, it's, not going to kill them, but I can't see it as being anything but a third tier, last choice drug because it's so hard on the body. And it's like, now it's like everyone's doing it.
Yeah. Wow. And so you were on that committee that was looking at that. That was one of the things.
Yeah.
How many people are typically on a committee?
Sure. It varies on each committee, but there are usually somewhere between 15 and 20 people on a committee. And
okay.
And most of them, they're a mixture of academic medical scientists, epidemiologists, specialist doctors, clinical doctors, teaching doctors, me. There's usually often I'm a consumer advocate and I get a vote. A patient advocate is a different thing. Interestingly, they define it differently. A patient advocate tends to be a specialist in just one area. Like I could be a patient advocate for DES because I know a lot about it, but I'm not. There's no need for that. So that's why a patient advocate doesn't get a vote. There's also a pharmaceutical company industry representative who does not get a vote, gets to sit on the committee. So
interesting.
15 to 20 people, and that's it is advisory, but the FDA 95% of the time follows the advice.
Interesting. And so FAERS, that's the FDA Adverse Event Reporting System. Do you know, is that the same as that they use for supplements? Because I'm in the supplement industry, and I know we actually have to report the any severe adverse side effects of our product. And it's a fascinating kind of process. I'm wondering, how much. Do you know if it's the same? And do you guys ever have conversations about supplements?
We talk about supplements a lot at MedShadow. And it's supplements have exactly the same issues that drugs have. Plus another issue in that the FDA does not approve or review supplements. Anyone can put out a supplement out of their basement. If it starts harming people, the FDA will come after you.
Yes. Well, and that does presuppose that you're doing the needful, the thing that you are legally required to do, which is reporting it through, I think it is the adverse event reporting system. And some people might think that a supplement company like us would never want to report. We actually want to report because it's a legal requirement. But if other people are reporting something about our supplement, then we want the FDA to have the information so that they can make good decisions. And one bad report doesn't mean they take something off the market, whether it's a medication or a supplement. It just allows them to accumulate data, and then if everyone's right pinky toe is falling off, then we should probably look at this and make an adjustment.
It's like when a pharmaceutical company has a drug recall. You immediately think, well, that's a bad drug company. That's probably the good drug company because they care about not hurting people first and foremost, but it also means that they're trying to fix the problem. If there are companies out there that know that there are problems with their manufacturing of their drug and they don't have a recall, they just hope nobody catches them.
Yeah.
So a recall is not, don't condemn a company for recalling or trying to make their product better.
So have you participated in actual meetings with this kind of FDA committee about supplements? So it's a medication and no. Okay. That's conversations that you have on MedShadow.
Thank you.
Yeah,
that's a conversation we have on MedShadow. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And, we do suggest that people look for third-party verification that the contents of the drug, of the supplement is what it says it is. And so there's, you probably know the verification companies better than I do. And it's important to look for that. interestingly, and I'm going to open a can of worms here, and we're at the end of our time, so we can't get into it, but 90% of the drugs, 92% of the drugs we take in America, are generics. Generic drugs are not tested to make sure that they are what they say they are. Before you can distribute a generic drug, the FDA has to approve you to do it. So you have to prove your manufacturing facilities have the ability to, and you have the ability to create an appropriate generic. And there are rules for generics. It has to have the same effect on the body. It can't have allergens in it. It has to, if the brand name drug that you're making a generic for is a liquid, you need to be a liquid. If it's a capsule, it needs to be a capsule. If the brand name drug is a capsule that dissolves in 4 hours, then your generic should dissolve in 4 hours in your body, that type of thing. But the FDA is so, between the pandemic and the budgets, the only way they check generics, again, unless there's a signal of a problem, is they inspect manufacturing facilities. They do surprise inspections throughout the United States. They go to India, they go to China, they go to Europe, and they, in China and India, it's very hard to do a surprise inspection because visas are needed and interpreters are needed. So there's it's an area that I'm starting to look in very closely, because if you're taking a generic drug and it's not what you think it is, you're not getting the drug care that you think you are, and so you're not getting care. But there's harm. There's harm if it's dissolving too quickly. You're getting too much of the drug in your body. If the imagination runs wild.
It sounds like the generic version of drugs is a little bit more Wild West than you think it is, right? Like I just assume a generic was exactly the same, even with the oversight, with the same oversight, which sounds like it is not true.
So this is something to think about. If you've been taking a generic drug even for a while and suddenly it doesn't seem to be working anymore, go to your friend the pharmacist and ask them. There's something called an orange book. The pharmacist will know this. Just say, this drug used to work for me. Is it made somewhere else now? Or is a different company manufacturing this? And if that's so, ask if he can fill the prescription using the old company that worked for you, or try a different company. Because again, there's more than one generic out there. If a pill isn't working for you, even if it stops working for you, do something about it. Don't assume that you've gotten worse. Don't assume that you're going to just spiral down and get old and die. No, you can probably fix this.
Interesting, yeah, and maybe even go back and try the brand name to make sure efficacy is still there for you.
The problem is, of course, the insurance company may balk at paying for the brand name. But, But to go on for a trial for a month and see if that makes a difference, well, maybe you can afford it for a month and see, and it will give you information.
Yeah, wow. This has been the fascinating conversation that I had wanted. I want to get into our wrap-up questions and be mindful of time. Is there anything I missed that you want to share? Well, let me ask this, because I think this is important. So medshadow.org, anybody who's listening to this, maybe there's a medication that you've just gone on. There are a couple of ways to look at it. You've already talked about, taking care of stomach acids. So you could go there and look at the particular solution that you're trying, the thing that you're trying to solve. You could probably go and do a search for a particular medication. And if you've got data on that, then they can pull that up. Is there any other way that they might use medshadow.org?
You'll also find first person stories. So you can read through another person's actual experience. You could share your experience on MedShadow. So don't forget, we're also on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube channel.
Okay, and we'll get that repeated. All right, here we have wrap up questions. Suzanne, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
I don't. I want to have a health span, and I think particularly as you get over 40, which I am well over 40. Everything you do affects the length of the health span that you're going to have. So I work out now more than I ever did. I'm probably in better shape than I was 15 years ago, but I play tennis, I work out, I eat well. I take one supplement. I take protein supplements because protein's so important as you age. It's hard to keep your muscles strong, and that helps. No, I saw my mother died, I think early. Well, both my grandmothers died of COPD. My mother died of COPD. They were all smokers. And they all died young. My mother did make it to 83, but it's a horrible way to die. Horrible way to die. You're just drowning in you. It's horrible. So I'm a never smoker. And I just watched today is the 4th year anniversary of my mother-in-law dying at the age of 99. And she was walking and, in touch with all of her 12 grandchildren. She knew I was a daughter-in-law. She knew all of my friends' names. Wow. She would come to our parties and our weekend house. So she was active up until the last couple of months. And the day she didn't get out of bed, the person, we had a live-in person living with her, called us and said she won't get out of bed. And that was 6 days later she died.
Wow. So would it be fair to say that your target is 99 as long as you live like she did?
Yes.
Okay. I like that. And I know this is not your area of expertise. Do you have kind of an idea of how long you think humans can live?
No. I've been listening to a lot of smart people who are studying that right now. I don't believe humans can live forever. That's ridiculous. Nor do I think they want to. I think that there is a point in life where you are done. My mother-in-law was done at 94, 95. She, all of her friends, almost all of her friends had died. Her husband had died. And while she loved her family and she stayed engaged and alert, she was ready. She was more than ready. So I think that there is a point that people are ready. And does it happen when you're 110 for some people and at 82 for others? So I want to put off that point as long as possible. I make a point of making friends. I'm having a bachelor watch party in my apartment next week. The Bachelor. Cool. I don't even watch it, but I can get, a bunch of early 30-year-olds and late 20-year-olds and we eat pizza, and I try to keep friends that are young and old.
Very cool. All right. Do you have 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets let's call them shortcuts because everybody loves shortcuts for longevity and a long health span that you would share?
Yes, there are. First of all, if you need medicine, know when you're going off of it. If you're on your meaning ask your doctor before you start, how do I stop? It's every day, go out for a walk. Every day, have a conversation with a friend. If you can, go out for a walk with your friend. I think social interaction is as important as exercise. I think nutrition is as important as both of them. And so those are the 3 things that I am depending on for my health. And that's mental health and physical health.
Excellent. And 1 to 2 things that you think people are getting absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span?
Yeah. Longevity is living to an old age is not my goal. Yes, it is. But just living is not my goal. I need to live it happily and engaged. I think chasing after a number is not the game I want to play.
So don't chase.
And I want to eat chocolate ice cream. I'm not going to live on supplements. There are a couple of the leaders in longevity that literally live on supplements. I will not do that. It's not worth it to me.
And I think I would add, and I'm sure you'll co-sign this, is like, don't blindly trust the medications that are potentially being prescribed to you, right? Like, be that CEO of your own health. It's okay to be stupid. You're not a medical doctor. So go and ask the questions and then get informed. And most of the time, you have time.
Yeah.
And we've touched, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. Don't expect a pill to fix you.
I like that. All right. So how can people contact you? You mentioned desaction.org, which is one of your websites, obviously specifically focused on DES. MedShadow.org is there, and then MedShadow is you on Instagram also?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Anything?
And it says on TikTok too, if you still have TikTok. And I think it's med_shadow on Facebook.
Okay, excellent. And what in the near future are you excited about?
I'm going to Australia.
Awesome. That'll be a great trip.
That's what I'm excited about.
Going to Sydney? I spent 2 weeks in Sydney once and felt it wasn't enough.
We are going to Perth first.
Oh, yeah.
It's actually a business trip for my husband. And then we haven't planned the rest of it yet. We've got a couple months ahead of us but I think we're going to take the time to get to Sydney and get to the outback and maybe, the coral reefs. Who knows?
That'll be an amazing trip. All right. So you can find out more about DES at desaction.org, medshadow.org. Go check out whatever prescription that might be prescribed to you or what kind of medical condition you're trying to solve with medications. You can find information there. Please follow her on IG. That's MedShadow on IG, MedShadow on TikTok, and then on Facebook, it's med_shadow. Suzanne, thank you so much for joining us today.
Chris, you're a great interviewer. Thank you so much. It's a lot of fun.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.